Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. Today we got some breaking news. It's being reported by Ariel Helwani that the UFC is working on booking Yair Rodríguez versus Brian Ortega in the featherweight division. There's really no date yet set for this fight, and this fight is not official yet. But being as it's being reported by Ariel, it's probably legitimate news. Whether or not it actually comes to fruition or not, that remains to be seen. But either way, the UFC is working on trying to book this fight, and I absolutely love this matchup. This is a fight that I've been talking about for a couple months now, since Yair lost to Max Holloway, since Brian Ortega lost his featherweight title shot against Alexander Volkanovski. And this fight is absolutely perfect for the fans, for the division, just absolutely everything about it I love. You look at the division, though, right now, the division is kind of in a weird spot. Alexander Volkanovski takes on the Korean Zombie at UFC 273. The Korean Zombie is on a one-fight winning streak against Dan Ige. Doesn't really deserve the title shot. Originally, Volkanovski was supposed to fight Max Holloway at UFC 272, which is coming up in a couple weeks, the beginning of March. But Max was injured, so then they were going to schedule the fight for 273, and then they decided to substitute the Korean Zombie in, so it kind of got weird. And then turns out Max Holloway could be ready by UFC 273, which goes down in April. So the division is an absolute mess right now, because the fight to make for the division is Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway 3. Unfortunately, because the UFC gave the Korean Zombie the title shot when Max Holloway's injury status was kind of up in the air, now they can't really take it away from him. I think he's flown to the United States to train for this fight. It's kind of a weird spot, considering Max is definitely the #1 contender, coming off a win against Yair Rodríguez, being in those close fights against Volkanovski in the past. And it's a weird spot. Now we have the Korean Zombie fighting Volkanovski. And also there's a rumored fight between Holloway and Josh Emmett. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But either way, we have Yair Rodríguez versus Brian Ortega. And I absolutely love this stylistic matchup. You have Yair Rodríguez, who is one of the best strikers in the division, one of the flashiest strikers in the division. And I had my doubts about Yair Rodríguez before the Max Holloway fight. And I think a lot of people really counted him out against Max Holloway, and he lost via decision. But the fight was much closer than people anticipated. And not only that, I was shocked that Yair Rodríguez arguably won the 5th round against Max Holloway. If you would have told me that before the fight, I wouldn't have believed you. And that fight was amazing, and it was very competitive, even though Max Holloway won that fight. Then you have Brian Ortega. He's kind of in a weird spot. He lost to Max Holloway a couple years ago in brutal fashion. I think it was a doctor stoppage in between rounds, or a corner stoppage in between rounds. Took some time off, came back, and put on a masterclass against the Korean Zombie. Then he earned himself a title shot against Alexander Volkanovski, because there was really nobody else. They were on the Ultimate Fighter. They fought in September of 2021, and he lost. And I know people talked about that fight as one of the best fights of the year for 2021. It was not. Now, don't get me wrong, round 3 was amazing. Volkanovski was in some serious trouble with the submission attempts of Brian Ortega. They were very tight. But the majority of that fight was a one-sided beating. And Brian Ortega now, even being a younger guy, has taken a significant amount of damage in the Max Holloway fight and now in the Alexander Volkanovski fight. And I wonder, because after the Max Holloway fight, he took a lot of time off. Now, Yair versus Brian Ortega hasn't been booked for a date yet, but my guess is spring, summer, somewhere around there, maybe fall. And, that fight against Volkanovski, where he took a lot of damage, was just at the end of September, so not that long ago. So he wouldn't have that long period of time off after a brutal beating by Volkanovski. But, we'll see how he comes back and returns. But overall, stylistically, these guys match up amazingly. You have Yair, who's just an amazing, flashy striker. Has some decent grappling. I think he's worked on it and improved over the last few years. But we haven't had anybody really to test it. And then you have Brian Ortega, who is known for being a jiu-jitsu guy, who has ever-evolving striking. Look what he did to the Korean Zombie. Looked amazing in that fight. But we can definitely say Yair Rodríguez definitely has the striking advantage. We can definitely say Brian Ortega definitely has the grappling advantage. But it's very interesting, because Brian Ortega, while he's amazing on the ground, has great submission threats, great jiu-jitsu. He doesn't have the best wrestling and takedowns to get you to those positions. The scramble with Volkanovski ended up because of a slip by Volkanovski, if my memory is correct. He just doesn't have the best grappling to take you down, but once he can get you to there, he does amazing looking for submissions. So it's going to be very interesting because Ortega's striking is ever evolving. Yair's, we know where Yair's striking is. He has great flashy kicks. He's powerful everywhere. His hands are evolving, and also his grappling is evolving. He's been exposed, but it's been so long when he got dominated by Frankie Edgar, taken down, ground and pounded on the ground. It's been like 5 years. I think that was back in 2017. It's been 5 years since then, and I'm sure that Yair Rodríguez has been training grappling, takedown defense. And I'm curious because Brian Ortega already doesn't have the best entries to takedowns. How is he going to do if Yair is able to stuff the takedowns and this fight is competed majority on the feet? Because that's not going to be a favorable matchup for Brian Ortega trying to strike with Yair Rodríguez. But on the other side, I wonder if Brian Ortega is able to get Yair Rodríguez down once. Is Brian Ortega just going to be able to kind of bully him with the jiu-jitsu, similar to Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Justin Gaethje, where Yair just looks like a fish out of water and is immediately submitted? Because Brian Ortega has some of the slickest submissions in all of the UFC. Forget just the featherweight division. He has nasty submissions. It's a very interesting and compelling matchup, and I would have no problem with this. Deserves to be like a headliner of a fight night. Or if it is on a pay-per-view card, it should be a co-main event, a 5-round co-main event. This fight must be 5 rounds. And as far as this fight, where does the winner go? Yair Rodríguez finds himself in a weird spot because if he gets a win, he's a guy who hasn't fought the champion in Alexander Volkanovski yet. But if Volkanovski beats the Korean Zombie, Max Holloway's waiting out there in the wings. Max has a win over Yair recently. Also, Max was originally supposed to fight Volkanovski. So Yair would be in a weird spot with a win. He could potentially kind of sit out for a little bit and maybe get a title shot by default. But I just don't know where he goes with a win. It's going to be a little bit of a funky position for him. And then Brian Ortega's even in a weirder spot if he wins because he has a loss to Max Holloway. He has a loss to Volkanovski. He has a win over the Korean Zombie. So if the Korean Zombie could pull off an upset over Volkanovski, he'd be in an interesting spot. But even if that happens, Volkanovski's probably going to get a rematch against the Korean Zombie if he were to lose. So the featherweight division is just a complete disaster, but it's an amazing disaster because we have some fun matchups. I would hope, honestly, me as a fan, if Yair Rodríguez beats Brian Ortega and Zabit comes back, maybe fights one time, gets a win against somebody lower down the rankings, I hope the UFC tries to put together Yair Rodríguez versus Zabit Magomedsharipov in a 5-round main event of a fight night for potentially a #1 contender spot. Has to be a 5-round fight. I would absolutely love that matchup. That is a matchup that us as MMA fans, it would be a travesty if we never got to see. But the division's in a weird spot. Let me know what you guys think. As far as an early prediction, I have to go with Yair Rodríguez. Every fight starts on the feet. I think Yair is a far superior striker than Brian Ortega, but Ortega is evolving, ever evolving with that striking. I did not expect him to beat the Korean Zombie, so who knows? Maybe he comes out and he shocks us and is able to outstrike Yair Rodríguez with the threat of the jiu-jitsu, threat of the takedown. You know how that works. Sometimes, the guy who doesn't necessarily have the better striking is able to be more effective with the striking because of the threat of the grappling. We've talked about it countless times on the channel. And I'm also curious, again, if Ortega can get him down, can he submit him? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Who wins this fight, Yair Rodríguez or Brian Ortega? Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.